it's time for us to speak the only language he understands, and it's time to use the so-called trade bazooka.
During the World Economic Forum, the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent urged European countries not to retaliate against the US trade tariffs threatened by Trump over the Greenland crisis.
It's been 48 hours. As I said, sit back, relax. I am confident that the leaders will not escalate and that this will work out in a manner that ends up in a very good place for all, for national security, for the U.S. and for Europe.
Well, the US Treasury Secretary said that predictions Europe might stop lending to the US were false.
I just want to say this is a false narrative that there is no talk in European governments. This was a report written by Deutsche Bank that this could happen. The media has latched onto this. I think it is a completely false narrative. It defies any logic, and I could not disagree more strongly on that.
That's the US Treasury Secretary. The Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, well, he reiterated his country's objection to these tariff threats.
Canada strongly opposes tariffs over Greenland and calls for focused talks to achieve our shared objectives of security and prosperity in the Arctic.
That's Mark Carney there. Now, welcome to Drive, Jeremy Hunt, the former Foreign Secretary. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, John.
Hi, Jeremy. So the old political dictum advises speak softly and carry a big stick. Now, Keir Starmer is speaking softly. Do you think he's going to have to wield a big stick and strike back if Trump does go ahead and punishes those NATO partners, including us, who oppose him taking over Greenland?
Well, I agree with the speaking softly bit, because I think you do need to be diplomatic in a situation like this and avoid what could be a very dangerous escalation. But I'm worried that his stick isn't quite big enough, because, at the root of all of this is that we are going to carry on being pushed around by an America led by Donald Trump unless we are able to defend ourselves. And the only reason that Donald Trump is trying this on, and by the way, I do think he's trying it on. I don't think there is any plan to actually invade Greenland. He's just trying to get the Europeans to be so scared that we agree to negotiate on Greenland's sovereignty. And that's all that's going on here. But the reason that he thinks he has a chance of doing this is because he knows that we depend on the US for the defense of Europe and specifically the defense of Ukraine. And the thing that would be really that big stick that you're talking about, John, would be if Europe had a credible plan to defend itself. And everyone's paid lip service to it, yes. Even Islam has, but it isn't happening. And that is the cause of our ongoing weakness.
So what should that big stick look like, Jeremy?
Well, let's see some plans as to how and when we are actually going to get up to this 5% of GDP being spent on defence. Let's see some credible plans to increase the size of the army so that we could put troops in Ukraine if we needed to. Let's see what we're doing to modernise the tech in the armed forces, because we've seen from Ukraine everything is about drones and autonomous weapon systems and so on. But at the moment, frankly, it's all talk when it comes to European defence plans, not just the UK, by the way. Germany, France, exactly the same issue. Yeah. And that's why in Trump's eyes, we are basically weak.
But isn't the... I won't call it a plan, but the suggestions you set out there, aren't they just talk? The idea of getting spending in this country up to 5% of GDP, that is a plan extending over years to the extent that it's a plan. And the pressure is for urgent action. Maybe within days we will see whether President Trump actually follows through on his threat of punitive sanctions. And if he does, except that's still an if, and Keir Starmer is hoping it doesn't happen, but if it does happen, won't it call for an active response very quickly? Otherwise, we and other European leaders, if they don't act either, will be sacrificing credibility and moral authority, and to say nothing of national dignity.
Absolutely. And I agree. We're not going to be able to sort out our woeful underspending on defence overnight. But that is the root cause. And if we want to avoid being treated like this now and in the future, that's something that we do have to address. But you're right, we may have to decide things much sooner than that. And I think the reality is that, we have to recognise Donald Trump is not going to invade Greenland. It would be the end of the NATO alliance, which would mean that America became a lot less powerful and influential across the world, because a lot of America's strength, not all of it, But a lot of America's strength comes from the fact that it is the leading member of NATO, that dominates NATO just as it dominates so many other things. So I don't believe that even Donald Trump would want to tear that up. So that's why we have to react with cool heads. From that point of view, I think Keir Starmer is getting the tone right. I do think if you look at what happens, for example, with Trump's threats to China on tariffs, Trump's threats to Brazil on tariffs, if he thinks he's getting nowhere,
Yes.
he will often change course and back down. And that's why I don't think it's the time to overreact. But we do need to recognize the root problem here and do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, it is true, isn't it? The president has been forced to back down. It's the origin of that acronym. Trump always chickens out, TACO. But in the case of the China tariffs, in the case of the Brazilian proposed tariffs, he backed down in the face of overwhelming force. It was a reaction in the markets that forced the bond markets, that forced the president to back away on China tariffs. And from Brazil, there would have been reciprocal tariffs and embargoes that would have hurt Americans and the American economy too. So Europe would need something of the sort. And Jeremy, although you say you don't believe a president would actually take action, military action against Greenland, and you may be right, a lot of leaders and military experts believe it is at least possible. So there would need to be deterrence. There would need to be something to mobilize opposition in the United States. I mean, do you accept that argument?
I do. And look, I think Trump clearly wants us to believe that he might invade Greenland because that's part of his plan to up the ante and get everyone to the negotiating table. Look, all those things have to be considered. And it's true that in the case of China and Brazil, they had countermeasures that were uncomfortable for America. But what they didn't do was really ramp up the rhetoric. They were, quite careful about what they said. But as you say, they carried the big stick. And so all those things may have to be considered. All I would say is that I think that this particular situation ultimately will resolve itself without Greenland being handed over, because I think that this is a genuine red line for all European countries. It isn't going to happen. And that's why I think in some ways what we need to do is to keep calm and carry on that old British virtue.
Okay, it is a hope and a belief which you clearly share. Last question, really briefly, if I could. Do you think that Keir Starmer should say he and Britain is ready to join the Board of Peace with Donald Trump as its lifetime president, with $1 billion required from members, and with Putin sitting at the table? Should Britain say, yes, we'll join that?
I think it's a difficult call. I would say, on balance, it connects to the wider issues that we have with Donald Trump. And it may be something that's helpful in terms of resolving, issues like Greenland that we've been talking about earlier. I think you have to look at these things in the round. I wouldn't reject it out of hand just because Putin is there. But I would look at the wider ramifications and then make my decision.
All right, Jeremy Hunt, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
That is Jeremy Hunt, the former Foreign Secretary. And hello now to Karin Karlsboro, who's the Vice Chair of the European Union Parliament International Trade Committee. Hello, Karin.
Hello.
Good to have you here. Karin, tell me, what do you expect, looking beyond Davos, the EU summit on Thursday in Brussels, leaders gathering there? What do you expect those leaders of the EU to decide by way of tariffs and possible retaliation against America?
Well, I would like to first say that President Trump has gone far beyond all bounds and shown utter disrespect for his closest ally. And we deeply regret that the US is not acting as the close friend and partner they used to be. So, President Trump is not elected president in the world. He is the elected president in the United States. And it's time for us to speak the only language he understands. And it's time to use the so-called trade bazooka.
Okay, the trade bazooka, the anti-coercion instrument, which allows for reciprocal tariffs. It allows for the European Union members to hit America with tariffs as it is threatened to be hit by Donald Trump. So should that statement be made on Thursday ahead of any strikes, tariff strikes by Donald Trump? Should it happen as a preemptive strike, Karin?
Well, I must say that passivity is not the right response to President Trump. We see what that leads to. It just leads to more aggressivity from the White House.
Karin, forgive me, Karin. I'm just going to interrupt you briefly because our line 2 is just a little bit shakier than we would ideally want. I'm really keen to hear your thoughts and your answers to these questions. But at the moment, the line is a little bit dodgy, as sometimes happens, especially on live radio, as you can understand. We're going to come back to you in just a moment and hopefully get a clearer line to you, which I'm told now we do have. Karin, forgive that interruption in our conversation. Are you saying that you do think after the Thursday summit there should be an announcement then, before any American tariffs, that Europe is ready to do as you suggest and hit America every bit as hard as America hits us in Europe?
Well, we worked very hard here from the European Parliament for a firm response, because we have this anti-coercion instrument for a situation like this. And as you know, this bazooka, so-called bazooka, could be compared with NATO's Article 5, one for all for one.
And that threat should be made immediately on Thursday, you think?
Yes, I think we have seen President Trump escalate step by step, and it's time to walk the talk for the European Union.
So, Karin, tell me this, because not all European leaders seem to be of the same frame of mind. Emmanuel Macron is all for going in hard and threatening a retaliation on Thursday. Others are more hesitant, aren't they? Like the German leader, maybe the Italian leader. And of course, well, Britain is not in the European Union, so there's no we in that sense. But of course, Keir Starmer is he's biding his time and treading softly too. So do you think there will be the necessary unanimity of view to make that threat?
I think there is a broad support from a majority of the EU countries, with also support from other partners like perhaps Norway, Canada, to act against these threats from the United States. And enough is enough, and it's time to respond. If we don't respond now, when should we do it?
All right, Karin Karlsboro, pleasure to talk to you, Vice Chair there of the European Parliament's International Trade Committee.